Let's just talk about the British justice system. Some of the most revered justice has been served in the world, apparently, according to legend. And we've witnessed it over the years, I think, weaken. But obviously, that's just my opinion, of course. So I'm interested to see what your opinion is. I'm going to use an example. On my Twitter page, on my Twitter newsfeed, a woman has been brutally assaulted by a complete stranger. She posted this saying that the defence solicitor for the man who basically beat her up at her own front door, his defence solicitor, I won't give names, said she brought it on herself because she didn't shut the door fast enough. Now, it's a stranger at your door. Would you expect anyone to beat you up at your front door? You don't know him, you've no track record with him. So let's just leave that as an instance. But let's look at another case, more famous. There's an ITV drama called A Confession, starring Martin Freeman. It's very good. I caught up with it on ITVX. It's a true to life adaptation, and it says so. It's not based on. It is a true story, and there's two things here. There's the crimes themselves and the criminal, and then there's the way the policeman got treated. So I'm going to talk about whether or not we trust the justice system, because grooming gangs are an example of why I don't trust the justice system. I think the sentences aren't steep enough, and yet people get much stiffer sentences for lesser crimes. So I'm not familiar with the system. I've never really been in trouble with the police, so it's not like I'm any expert. But getting back to A Confession on ITV, I suggest it's a good watch. It's really good. Freeman plays an excellent part. He plays Detective Steve Fulcher, who worked for, I think it was Marlborough Police, somewhere in the Cotswolds. You'll see it if you watch it. Basically, a girl goes missing, a decent girl who worked in an office, loved by a family, goes missing. The police start investigating. He's the SIO on duty, so he gets the case. Obviously, the series gives you a bit of background into his family life. He's got a nice wife, 2 kids. The girl that's gone missing is pretty decent. They managed to find it through investigative work. They suspect a taxi driver. Now, 8 years before this, another girl went missing from the same neighbourhood. They were close by neighbours, but this girl was more wayward and sadly got involved with drugs, which got her involved in prostitution, but nevertheless somebody's daughter. And I'm quite sure Imelda Staunton, I think, played the mother. She played an excellent part, depicting how the mother felt, anticipating her daughter coming home. She was missing for 8 years. Anyway, it turns out that Martin Freeman, they eventually make an arrest for the perpetrator, who's a taxi driver. And what he says is they're going to make an arrest on the grounds of kidnapping. They're going to do that because they do feel there's a chance that this new one is still alive. They don't know anything about this other missing girl at this point. You do as the viewer, but the copper doesn't know. So he gets this guy, and his mannerism, the way the copper handles this suspect is really good. They basically talk to him about kidnapping, and basically they're saying that they think the girl is still alive. By handling it this way, the guy confesses in the back of the car. Yeah, it's me, I did it. I moved a body the other night, moved it in this ditch. So obviously he seizes the moment, does the detective, thinking, of all things, right, can he show us where it is? So he takes him to the body, and sure enough, he's rolled it in a ditch. So they're on their way back, and the perpetrator says, he's called Christopher Halliwell, he says to the copper, do you want another one? So the copper goes, what? Another what? He says, another one. Is what, another murder? He said, yeah, two enough. So he then opens up to another murder. So at that point, the copper should have read him his rights on the murder. He can get away with not having read him his rights over the kidnapping, because it's called PACE, which is this thing for protocol when you arrest someone to give them their rights. Because there was a threat to life, or a perceived threat to life, because the girl was supposedly still alive, they didn't have to read him his rights because time was of the essence. Sadly, the girl was dead. But this was actually talking about a girl that was missing 8 years earlier. So, knowing full well that 8 years missing, the chances of finding a body are slim. The guy's confessed. He's going to take us to where the body is. And he did. They drove in the car. He took them to where the body was. They found the body. Then he said he took him to the police station and read him his rights. Whereupon he got a solicitor, this is the critical bit. The solicitor gets appointed and advises him no comment and tells the copper off for talking to him for so much and getting him to confess. Basically that his rights have been breached because what should have happened, he should have been read his rights at a police station and that bit's been missed out. So the copper tries to explain, yes, but time was of the essence. The girl could have been alive and he was right to do so. There is a bit of a loophole in the procedure where you can do that, but he slipped up on the second part. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'd had a daughter missing for 8 years and there was an opportunity to find her remains and get some closure and the copper initiated a set of circumstances that led to that, I'd be grateful. And the series depicts this attitude from the parents. But the bit that gets me with this is that because of the procedure that the police have to go through reading criminals their rights and to safeguard the fact that they could very well have an innocent person sat there, and police have probably abused the system in the back in the 70s. This guy then, basically, they couldn't use the confession in the trial. It gets worse. They went to trial because it didn't need to be a big drawn-out thing because he confessed to the murder of the girl they found that was only missing recently. So it didn't have to put a family through the gory details. But the trial judge, who'd only ever dealt with family law, was new to criminal law, and the defence wanted the confession kicking out because it was made, they said, under duress. It wasn't. It was made off the cuff, but not under duress. And she's new and inexperienced, so they kick it out. They won't let the confession come in. But he's pleaded guilty, so they've still got him. But it turns out he gets 30 years, but because he's fessed up and hasn't put the family through a trial, she knocks 5 years off, gives him 25 years, so he'll be out when he's 70. But the other murder gets ignored, doesn't even get brought to trial, which is diabolical because he took him to the body. It gets worse. So that's the end of that. Then the father of the missing girl, who's been missing for 8 years, who they identified through bones and what have you, they go and tell the family the mum and dad are split up. The mother is eternally grateful that the detective found the remains. The father, who is portrayed in this TV series as a bit of a little bit wee, he's up in arms about it. It's all about himself, how it's inflicted pain on him, and yet he's never seen it for years. It's one of them. He puts a complaint in to the police about the detective not issuing his rights so that the murder trial couldn't go for 2 cases. Now, the mother, on the other hand, was glad he'd done it because she'd just got her daughter back. That's all she thought. She can have a funeral. She's obviously destroyed. She was destroyed years ago when she went missing, but she now has closure, so she's grateful. So there's this two-way street. But the police, they investigate it, IPCC, and he has a sort of trial, as it were, and they find him guilty of gross misconduct. He's found the murderer, he's found the bodies, and he's brought closure to 2 distraught families. But because the second body was found before they'd read him his rights, it couldn't go to trial. So the copper basically loses his job after something like 25 years. And it was a successful case. He was hero worshipped locally. The family were grateful, apart from this dad. And it got left. Anyway, this detective, Steve Fulcher, was convinced that the state of the body of the girl had been buried longer because he had hands and feet had been cut off and there was no head. He was convinced that this wasn't just somebody having a go. He thought it was a serial killer and that they wouldn't have gone from 2002 to 2008 and the current day without murdering in between. He was convinced there were more murders but they wouldn't investigate it. So he got 25 years, time off for the time he'd served on remand, and it should have been a 30-year sentence. So he's in jail. Fortunately, the police do still investigate this other murder, and the parent, the woman, the mother of the girl that was buried for 8 years, got a petition together, and it got 47,000 signatures, and she took it to 10 Downing Street. There's footage of her going to Downing Street. Cameron is Prime Minister at the time. She took it to a local MP who agreed with her there should be a loophole in PACE, this procedural thing, to allow a detective to do what he did and extract more information out, especially with such a fantastic conclusion, finding the body and giving the family closure. So she was backing the detective up, and she wanted the system changing. She got a petition which was handed over to Parliament, handed over to number 10. It was talked about in Parliament. The Home Secretary looked at it, Theresa May. David Cameron, Prime Minister. Weeks went by. Well, it was deliberated over, and they came back and didn't change anything. So it's never been changed from that day. So this is a procedure that really, had he done it by the book, they would have took him back to the station, a solicitor would have been appointed, it'd have been charged, and he'd have gone no comment. They'd never have found that body. Anyway, they did continue to investigate it. By this time, this poor copper has struggled to find employment, and so has ended up working in places like Libya and Mogadishu to earn a salary. His wife and kids are at home, and he works away teaching police over there to operational skills, basically. So that's completely changed his life from where he was as a respected copper, because the pips and the squeaks, the hierarchy at the police decided that, they had to set an example that, procedure will be followed so that, criminals can be assured they'll get the best treatment. So there's this guy's life in tatters, and the parent is still pushing to get law changed, gets rejected at the highest level from the Prime Minister. So that's your justice system. They do go on to investigate, and they decide several years after, that yes, that basically the policeman did follow the right procedure, and yes, they should bring this back to trial, and with a different judge. The judge was a novice judge who was only used to dealing with family law, never done a criminal case, and a different judge could have looked at it differently. Remember, the copper's lost his job. So they bring it back to court, and the perpetrator, Christopher Halliwell, decides to represent himself. Numb as they come, good decision, bearing in mind what the courts think of people who represent themselves. But the best of it is, for the prosecution, they want to get the copper to come back as a witness for the police, to explain that he did confess and that it was a genuine confession. Imagine that. What a turn of events. So he does the right thing. He didn't say, no, stuff you. He came back and he came in as a witness. By this stage, the perpetrator has lied through his teeth. He's a real nuisance. He's lying in court. He's saying that he took a drug dealer there. It was a drug dealer who told him there was a body buried there. It was all baloney. And they threw the book at him. Fortunately, the new judge, the more experienced criminal judge, turned round and basically said it was a heinous offence, all the rest of it, dressed it up and said he'll serve full life, no parole, full life imprisonment, the rest of his life. So think about that. Think about the previous case I've just told you, because I just saw it on my timeline on Twitter. Do you have any faith in the judiciary? I'm not so sure I do. I realise people have to be protected once they go into custody, and we don't want to go back to the 70s, where they are portrayed as being more ruthless. But surely there's got to be some medium ground here, because the grooming gangs who are raping and drugging and kidnapping, basically, some have been held without their permission, get small sentences, and yet you do something like, what can I say, open your gym during a lockdown and you'll get the book thrown at you. And then you've got other things like men in women's prisons who are trans, allegedly trans, one in Scotland who didn't buy any female clothing till after his arrest, he was out on bail, and he bought female clothing and came out as trans during that period. So he was never trans beforehand, hoping to serve his sentence in a women's jail because they're a bit easier. And obviously, I think he was actually a sex offender. So how the hell did we get here? How did we get here with the judiciary? There's three parts to your government. There's the legislature, which is the parliament. Then there's the executive, which is the House of Lords and the King. And then there's the judiciary. And the judiciary is overseen by the Prime Minister. Obviously, that's why the petition had to go to him. So add it all together. Do you have any faith in the system? I'm just punting this out. You might be able to tell me on this thread that I'm absolutely, completely wrong. But I watched that account on TV and I read about it afterwards. I read several newspaper articles. And this Steve Fulcher was clearly a decent copper, a decent bloke who did the right thing. The whole town thought he'd done the right thing. The mother of the child that was missing, or the teenager that was missing, thought he'd done the right thing. He gave him closure. And yet it ended his career. It ended up in another trial, which is good. The perpetrator got entire life in jail. But can you believe it? They wanted the copper to come back as a witness to verify what he did in the first place. So to me, there's something wrong with that system. It needs to change because the perpetrators are overly protected now. It's gone full circle and it needs to come back. It needs to come back to some common sense ground where we can feel that we can entrust our lives to the judicial system. I don't feel like not that I'm out murdering people and doing bad deeds, I'm not. But I'm just putting that out because it shocked me. It left quite a big impression on me when I watched it. I enjoyed watching it because it was so true to life. And Martin Freeman played a really good part. It was enjoyable to watch, like a mystery, like they are, murder mystery. But a true case. And it wasn't just the murder girls, which was horrific. The mothers, of course. For the mothers, it's terrible. But the copper, he got finished. And that's British justice. That's how we work. We've got senior policemen who seem to want to cover everything up for a PR exercise. And coppers can't do the job because of all this red tape that's in between. You might be a copper. You might be a retired copper. You might think I'm talking through my backside. I won't be the first, will I? There's certainly 650 been doing it for the last 5 years in Parliament. Anyway, your thoughts would be appreciated.